This podcast is brought to you by SLEEuro, the European Lupus Society. Our mission is to build up a community of clinicians and researchers interested in SLE across the whole continent of Europe. We particularly want to engage younger physicians in the field, and we want to promote and coordinate the organisation of research and education on SLE across Europe. In addition to this, we want to promote equal access to the best standard of care for SLE patients across Europe. We're making a series of podcasts to introduce people to the main features of SLE research. And this podcast is about the idea of activity scores in analysing patients with SLE, and particularly in analysing the results of clinical trials. Part 1. Why do we need activity scores in SLE? We need activity scores because SLE is a complicated disease. Unlike rheumatoid arthritis, where you can assess the disease activity just by counting the tender and swollen joints, in a patient with SLE, there are many different organs and systems involved. One patient may have SLE of the skin, whereas another patient may have normal skin but SLE of the kidney. How do we compare those two patients? Which patient has higher activity and which patient has lower activity? In the same way, if one patient on one day has disease of the skin and that gets better, and on a later day they have disease of a kidney or the brain, has she got better? Has she got worse? How can we measure it? So an activity score is a way of measuring the clinical features of a patient with lupus so that they can be compared fairly with other patients with lupus, and so that they can be compared with scores in the same patient at a different time. That is the purpose of an activity score, a way of accumulating and scoring all the things that are happening in the patient with lupus and being able to compare them from time to time. Part 2. What types of activity scores are there? In general, there are two types of activity scores that we use in patients with lupus. These are called global activity scores and organ-based activity scores. They both have the same principle, which is that the physician records all the symptoms and manifestations and serological data from the patient at the time of assessment. These are recorded on a standard sheet, and the sheet is then used to derive a score. Part 3. What are global activity scores? A global lupus activity score is one where the physician records all the data about the patient, and these data are then combined together to form one number, one figure. So you would say that the score for that patient on that day is 10 or 5 or 3. You have a single number telling you everything about the patient. The main disease activity score which is used at the moment is the SLE Disease Activity Index, or SLEDAI. SLEDAI was originally developed in Canada. You may see different types of SLEDAI described in the literature. For example, SLEDAI 2K, Selena SLEDAI, or Mex SLEDAI, which is a Mexican version available in Spanish. These different versions differ in subtle ways, but in general, they all describe things which are present in the month prior to the assessment. To make a SLEDAI assessment, what you need is the SLEDAI scoring sheet. The scoring sheet is 1 page long, and you can record exactly what symptoms and serological markers are present in the patient. For example, seizures, kidney involvement, rash, arthritis, low complement, or high anti-DNA. Each of the things recorded is given a numerical score. So, for example, some major features may give a score of 8, whereas some minor features may give a score of 1 or 2. Then, you have to add up the scores for all the features you have recorded and this gives you the total SLEDAI score for the patient on that day. Remember, it's very important only to record things which have been caused by SLE. If your patient has a rash on the face caused by something else, not SLE, do not record it on the SLEDAI form. Only things caused by SLE in the month prior to the assessment must be recorded. Therefore, once you've recorded the manifestations on the sheet, it's really easy to derive the SLEDAI score from the patient as a number. SLEDAI has a number of advantages. One advantage is it's relatively easy to record it and then to calculate the score. Another advantage is that it gives you a single figure, and that's useful for statistics. It's easy to see whether the SLEDAI has gone up or down, and it's easy to calculate the mean SLEDAI for a group of patients. For example, comparing a treatment group with a control group. On the other hand, SLEDAI has disadvantages. With a SLEDAI score, you can't tell exactly which organ is involved at a particular time. So, for example, a patient might have a SLEDAI score of 10 on 2 separate occasions, but on one day that might be made up of skin and joint disease, high anti-DNA and low complement, and on another day it might be mainly due to kidney disease or brain disease. You can't tell from the score alone. SLEDAI is very widely used, primarily because it's a very easy thing to score.